All right, so thank you all for being here. I'm Afra. I'm a practitioner at the Centers for Spiritual Living, and we have a fantastic panel of individuals from different faiths and spiritual disciplines. We'll tell you a little bit about their journey. And this is like Academy Award style, like Dr. Jim said, that we will cut you off at that 2 minutes for the answer to your question. So I think first and foremost, we're going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the spiritual discipline with which you are associated, whether that's a non-denominational faith or a denominational faith, and how you've come to identify with it. And you have 2 minutes for that very big question. Are we starting with you?
I guess you are.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Jim Terrell. I've been a minister for 39 years. That's okay, you can applaud later. I'm a minister of what called science of mind, or religious science. Religion is your relationship with God, and science is the study of that relationship to strengthen it. We believe that all paths lead to God, so all of my colleagues up here, they're doing their good work, we're doing our good work. And so our philosophy is more along the concept of a philosophy. We don't have a lot of dogma in our center. We do study all the major religions of the world, and we study. And I talk frequently from the Bible, although I also talk from other religious documents. So that's mine.
Good job.
That was fast.
2 minutes.
See if I can beat you. Yeah, my name is Phil Wood, and I come from the Christian tradition. My wife and I we started a church here in Costa Mesa, I guess 15 years ago, and then 2 years ago we stepped out of that and have been doing some other work. And then you asked how I came into the tradition. I grew up in Texas, in Houston, and so everybody was a Christian where I was from.
Yeah.
And so, that was like the water that I swam in, and then it became my own probably when I was 18 after I had some brokenness in my family. I had to work out through middle school and high school, and then it became my own through that process. I met some really interesting, really cool people that actually embodied that in a way that was real and profound to me, and that's what led me into that tradition, because it was more of an embodiment tradition of self-giving love for the healing of the world. And so it was more about how do we embody that and live that out, and how do we make a more loving world. So that's what brought me in.
Thank you.
I am Sarah Halverson Cano. I am the pastor at Irvine United Congregational Church, where I've been since the thick of the pandemic in 2020. Prior to that, I was the pastor at Fairview Community Church in Costa Mesa. I am ordained within the United Church of Christ. I identify as a progressive Christian, so within obviously the Christian tradition, but I usually add that identifier as progressive. Like many have said already, I stand as a pluralist, so I recognize there are many paths to God, or many paths even for those that don't identify with a deity or theistic tradition. So my congregation is progressive. We really stand for social justice issues. We were the first congregation in Orange County 31 years ago to become open and affirming to the LGBTQ plus community, and that's been a very defining element to who our community is. Our denomination has been a floor leader in that as well. I'm sure there'll be more opportunities to share. So that's who I am. I have 2 children and on life's journey.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I greet you all with Islamic greeting of peace. My name is Akbar Hussaini. I'm an engineer by profession. I'm a Muslim, as you may have guessed by now. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I have a small manufacturing company that I run, actually not too far from here. We make industrial pumps. The most gratifying place that I do some work at is the Interfaith Council. I'm the executive director at Newport Mesa Irvine Interfaith Council, where Reverend Sarah was the former past president. She's actually the one who got me into the Interfaith Council. So I'm always grateful to her for that. I hope I'll get an opportunity to speak more about Islam, but I'll just leave you with the definition of Islam. Islam, as you know, would mean peace to some people, it would mean submission to some people, but the way I like to describe or define Islam is peace that is achieved through submission to the will of God. And we'll elaborate on that later. Thank you.
Yehuna te kame, chokwe otesia, inchi maniyabu kechamalea nebosewa teya. Excuse my sexy voice, you know we were all drumming and singing, so I'm gonna make the most of what I have. So I am an indigenous woman, I am Yoeme woman, which is the people. And for me, Se'imete Waiwarim is who we are as indigenous people. All our relations means everything and everyone. And so that is my practice. That oneness, that universal heartbeat, that pulse. So as an indigenous woman, a woman, an auntie, now an elder, in the making. Yeah, I'm getting used to that when they say, you're an elder, I said, in the making. So yes, I am a lover of all faiths, all ways of being. For me, it's an understanding of, as my grandfather spoke it so beautifully to me, he said, sweetie daughter, you gotta be out of your mind to practice spirituality, because it comes from the heart. So that's the place that I reside. Oh, chokwe otesia.
I think everyone thinks I'm an elder, and I'm like, I feel like I'm 11. So that's what I get becoming. So I am Rabbi Marcia Tilchin. I was born and raised in the Jewish tradition, and it's it's a deep part of my identity. Certainly not only as a religion, but it sort of defines who I am as a cultural heritage and a peoplehood, and it's what makes me different from almost everybody around me. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. Interestingly enough, even though there is a large there was a large immigrant Jewish population there, and then first and second generation. But where I lived, I've often been the only Jewish person in the room. So one of the things I'll just say is that my Judaism has always defined me as the other, and which has been really interesting, and it's strengthened my commitment to practice. Even though I do believe that the understanding of our Creator in all the facets that Judaism opens that up to anybody, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me because, as our friend over here said, it's the water that I swam in my household. And but what I'll say is that when I was little, women could not train to be leaders in the faith. That happened for me as an older woman. So my choice to pursue a career as a clergy person in my faith was something that happened in my 30s. And I've really learned, in terms of my studies, my command of liturgy and rabbinic texts and scripture and history and philosophy have all come to me in my 30s, 40s, 50s, and now 60s. And I really...
We'll give you the extra. Go ahead. Go ahead and complete
I was just going to say, and I've really enjoyed passing that on to other adult learners, because most people who are born Jewish don't really understand all that's available to them to access and how that can enrich your life. Thank you.
So, I think all of you know me, Mr. Stranger, right? So now Mr. Stranger is Suresh. My name is Suresh. I've been honored to be here, and I am practicing Hindu Hindu is not the right word, but because all of you understand Hindu, so we'll say Hindu. Okay? So practicing Hindu, and you can see I have 108 years here. So it has been for entire lifetime, right? Lifelong Hindu. So I have lived Hindu, breathe Hindu, drink Hindu, talk Hindu, everything Hindu, right? It's a divine, universal way of thinking. Okay? That's very important. When your thinking is right, then what happens is you are able to action on that. And when that action is there, then comes out everything else. Service, worship. Worship is not the right term, but because all of you understand worship, so I'll use the term worship. So that is the way it helps. So it is a universal, divine way of entire living. That's true. Now, religion is another term I have learned here, right? Yeah. It's all of you understand religion. I have to learn religion, right? Religion and what we call in Hindu Dharma is Dharma. I just said Dharma. Apparently, or I believe there is no translation, right? My English is very poor. I am not as articulate as yours, but I really know there is no translation. So I can just compare. We have Pacific Ocean here, right? Yeah. So Dharma is like a Pacific Ocean. And religion is like any lake, pond, anything. I am familiar with Irvine Lake. So you can say like that. Or like Costco store. Costco store is ocean, that is Dharma. One aisle in Costco store is religion. So this is a very briefly. Now what Hindu Dharma is, I have briefly tried to explain. There are some posters here. It is only knowledge, nothing else. The Vedas are the basic books. Veda, the meaning of Veda itself is knowledge. And she has given a bell. So next time. You have to honor. You have to always honor people.
Thank you all for that, Suresh. I'm going to put you back on the podium and restart the bell, actually. So I love that you mentioned this aspect of learning what religion is, and it sounds like you come from a discipline of an all-encompassing way of thinking. So what I'd love to hear from each of you, and I think the audience would too, is what does faith mean for each of you? And when it comes down to it, what is one word that describes your belief system? Whatever you may identify with. So Suresh?
Faith, belief, these are all our words, right? She correctly said, what we live is important. And that is what is Dharma. Dharma is like a very simple way. Fire is a Dharma. Fire's Dharma is, it will burn, right? It will glow, right? Or water will flow. Or air will cool, or air will go. This is the Dharma. So Dharma for human beings is exactly what you don't want for yourself and others. Means you don't inflict anything for self or others. That is real Dharma basically. There are a lot of things. Dharma is what is moral, what is scientific, what is logic, all types of things is there. So this is very briefly I can tell you. And she said one word, right? Yeah. So there is no one word at all. 10,000 years of documented thing I cannot put in one word. Okay? But if she allows me, I can give few more words. Okay? Okay. Single thing is I have to speak in your language. So I have to translate, right? So can I?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. See? So starting is Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinas. I'll just say in English to translate. All be happy. All be without any ailments, disease, whatever you call it, right? Negativity, bad credit history, right? And always be helping each other. That is very essence. Yeah. Another word is let light come to me. Let ignorance be removed. Another word is me being mortal. I want to feel of immortality. I think that's sufficient, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. May we all be immortal in connection and in service, as you described. All right, same question. What does faith mean to you? Your faith, what does it mean to you? And if you could describe in one word or one phrase or multiple phrases.
So first of all, the Hebrew name that I was given. So most, probably not true anymore, but we all have two names. Jewish people have their Jewish name or their Hebrew name or their Yiddish name or whatever their cultural name is, and then the regular name. And they're often similar. So my Hebrew name is Minya Emuna. And that's, so my name is Marcia Emily. You can sort of hear how they sound the same. But Emuna means faith. So I was born with the name Faith, and I've always had a deep faith, even though I didn't articulate that as a child. But to me, faith basically means, faith of any kind is a recognition that there is a higher energy, a higher power. It doesn't have to be a deity, but something where we are part of something over which we have no control, and we were born here with a purpose because there is a greater design. That's my meaning of faith for anybody. And the word I would say, the single word, is unity or oneness.
Wonderful faith. I like it.
The single word for me would be Se'imete Waiwarim, all my relations. We are taught all my relations because we are connected to everything and everyone. Everything that is, we are. We are because it is because we are. And so for me, that one word would be all my relations. Se'imete Waiwarim. We may not use the word faith. However, we come with the understanding. For us, it's a knowing, trusting in your songs, in your prayers, in your ceremony, in your connection to everything. It's simple as that. In our way of being, it's believing and walking in beauty in your field of answered prayer. Trusting in that medicine, trusting in ceremony, being, listening, feeling, tasting, smelling with your whole being, your whole spirit, so that you can receive. When we're talking, we're unable to hear the wind, the trees, the blades of grass, the water, the fire, the four-legged. We were taught that we still, but we forgot, had one language. We were able to speak with the animals, and they offered us their lives. We don't call them animals. They are our medicine. They are our brothers and sisters. They are our family. And so it's that. It's remember the deep connection that we have to nature. Nature is our medicine and faith because we trust in it, I hope.
Thank you for that. And I love your emphasis on connection. So many of you have heard Shakespeare say, "I think, therefore I am." But really, from what you were saying, it kind of helped me to shift that to I am because I am connected. So I love that, connection being kind of that meaning and derivative of everything. Thank you for sharing. Great.
Well, I'll comply with the one word. I promised I'm going to elaborate on that. So the one word for me is Islam. And we define Islam as the peace that is achieved through the submission to the will of God. So let's analyze that for a little bit. What is peace? What is harmony? The true sense of peace is achieved when we don't have stress, when we don't have tension, when we don't have fear and anxiety. What are the normal sources of stress? Something that happened in the past, right? We wanted something to happen, we prayed to God for something to happen, but it did not, something else happened. That's generally we're thinking and dealing with the past. What's fear and anxiety? Something that could happen to me tomorrow, a year from now. So what's submission? Submission says decisions that were made in the past were made by an entity much wiser than you. Submit to it. Don't dwell on the past. Come to peace with it. And fear and anxiety for the future, are also going to be decided by the same entity who made the decision in the past. We can work towards certain goals, but the result is in his hands. See, when you take those things out through this thinking, you start living in the present. You start living in the present in harmony. In harmony not only inside, but outside. In harmony with all of you. In harmony with nature. In harmony with every living or non-living being. Because that's all creation of the same being who created us. That is the definition of Islam. And that's what faith means to me. Thank you.
Before we move on, I just want to comment on this aspect of submission. So many of you who know me may not know that I actually grew up in the Islamic tradition. I grew up in the Middle East, actually. And how I learned this aspect of faith was not so much submission, but analogous to that, the surrender to this creative process. That we don't have, like you said, we have this aspect of peace no matter what happens. That we don't have this attachment to an outcome, but really to this creativity of what is becoming. And knowing and living in that peace, which Islam really resonates with. Knowing that we are always in peace with whatever the outcome, because through that, we have our own creative process for a greater sense of being. So thank you for sharing that.
Although I met you the first time, it's absolutely no surprise for me coming from that tradition that you are a practitioner of this, because we have so much in common.
So
with
much
the
in common.
spirituality. So-
And hold that thought, because I'm going to ask each and every one of you about these common threads. So thank you for that.
Don't ring the bell on me.
Well, faith is such a big word, and it needs a lot of time to unpack, and I've been laughing to myself as everyone has answered it so differently. Faith in the Christian tradition often gets described as a belief. I have a belief in something. I use faith more to with two words, faith tradition. I usually see it as a faith tradition of something that we're a part of. So your faith tradition would be Islam, Native Indigenous, Judaism, Hindu. So the faith that you belong to. So I end up seeing that more as the word of commitment. So what am I committed to? What's my faith? Versus you have to believe in something and then you're going to get something back maybe, or just have faith. I hear people say that a lot. Just have faith. It'll be okay. I see it more as what am I committed to? And so in my tradition, I'm committed to following the Christian path, which is following Jesus. So my faith is about my commitment. And I have a very active faith. So for me, it's how do I act that out in my life and in my world and my community. So acts of justice are very much a part of my faith. And in doing so, I link that back to my faith tradition in Jesus and his life and his ministry. The word, it's so hard to come up with one word. It wasn't your word, but then you said it, connection. I really think that it all comes down to connection, and maybe justice in there too. I find that to be a very powerful idea, that when we're connected, we act justly, we act lovingly, we recognize that what I do to one, I do to myself, and we feel that full interconnection with either the word God or the holy or the one, and in that sense, my faith is a commitment to act for the one, for the all.
Love that. Commitment to act for the body.
Yeah, I'm like you. That's a big question. It's like a simple question, but there's a lot of complexity to get to the simplicity of that answer. And so I think faith, gosh, the Christian tradition is it's like so many interpretations built upon interpretations of theology, and I even think in the last 500 years since the Reformation and the Enlightenment that it's become such a heady, abstract thing that it actually often gets very disembodied from like a lived experience. And so so faith is like believing in something you can't see, and faith often becomes a list of doctrines, and you go to churches in my tradition and it's like, what's your statement of faith? And if I don't agree with point 7, I'm out, because it's all like define and divide, and so faith becomes quite divisive. But if you pull all that apart, I think it's like something else than that. I think it's beyond those beliefs. And I think it's like an embodiment. How do you connect into yourself, and how do you embody something and live it out in the world? It's like a real, like robust faith. It's way beyond ideation, and it's more around, I guess I would say embodiment would be a word. And so, I mean, you go back to the Jesus that you read about in the scripture, and it's like the animating spirit of the universe took up residence in a body to show us what was always been true about God, that God would love us so much that God would give God's self for us. You know, it's like a wild story of self-giving love to see a world healed. And then you contemplate that, and you think, well, then the movement's really from word to flesh. How do we enflesh these things? How do we enflesh awareness of the Spirit? How do we recognize the Spirit within us? Jesus said the same Spirit's in all of us. Well, you could do the same things. And so, yeah, I think it's a movement around awareness, trust, enfleshment, and then what kind of world are we making? You know, are we making a more loving world, or are we making something else? And I think a lot of faith can actually make quite a destructive, unloving space, violent space even. And I'm not interested in that anymore. But what I'm interested in is what kind of world are we creating?
Did you want to say something?
No, I want you to say something.
I was waiting for your response.
I'll
So,
always have a response.
I know you do. So, faith is really I spent a whole month giving talks on this word. And so I broke it down to 5 parts. It's focus. Where do you put your focus? How do you apply what your beliefs are? How do you initiate that belief? How do you transform your life? And then how do you harmonize with life? So our concept of living is based on verities or truths and versus conditions and circumstances. If you live in the circumstance of the condition, everything's a problem and needs a solution. If you live in the concept of a principle, such as love and life and light, those are principles that we practice, you're then allowing that to define who you are. I am that expression of light, I'm that expression of love, I am that expression of peace. So the principle defines who I am, and it makes my decision processes much easier with respect to who you are. Because I don't have to accept you as a condition or a circumstance, but I do, and it's my moral obligation, to see you as that peace, to see you as God. And when I do that, then I'm reflecting, I become a mirror in which you see yourself. And when you see yourself at peace, when you see yourself in love, when you see yourself in light, then you see yourself as the truth of who you really are. So my word is faith, but I also like the word complete. And I'll just pass this along. I always tell people when I'm counseling people who are going through situations like marriages and divorces and such, I said, is the relationship complete? And they'll say, no, it ended. It was over. Then it's incomplete. And you know what's worse than an F in school? An incomplete. So trust me, your emotional incompletes will follow you the rest of your life until you decide to complete them.
I love the words that we have to really embody faith. Complete connection, embodiment, peace. That's wonderful. So, Dr. Jim, I'm actually, like I said, I always have a response to you and a question for you. So I'm going to put you on the spot at this moment.
Okay.
And I personally have been privy to some of the things that have happened for you in the past few months. But I would love for each of you to tell us a little bit about a moment or series of moments when your faith has been tested and how you've really grounded yourself in faith, in those embodiments of faith.
Well, faith has caused me to have a really weird sense of humor. So what Afra is referring to is in October, the first week in October, my blood pressure was really, really low, and I was really trying to gasp for air. I was having a hard time taking a breath, so I went into the emergency room, and they determined that I had an aortic valve that needed to be replaced. They did that, but then I had to go back again the next week to get a pacemaker, and then I had to go back the third week and get another different kind of pacemaker that would defibrillate me, because I was going through all these things. But you know what's funny is I never had any pain, but I had a sense of humor, because when I finally got the defibrillator installed in me, they forgot to give me the right medicine so that it would make my pulse be right. So consequently, I was beginning to have what they call a heart attack, where I would literally begin to feel like I was losing sense in my brain, And then I would feel a warmth in my heart, that was my defibrillator working, and they would see a blue light, and I was okay. Now, when I went into the emergency room, they hooked me up to the machine, all the bells and whistles would go off, and it probably happened over 50 times before they finally figured it out. But I want you to say that's when I had faith. I had faith that I was absolutely fine, that whatever this was about, I was going to walk through it just fine. And the idea is to go through it, not become it. So that's sort of my answer.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, a time when it has been difficult for you to have faith. And how did you re-ground yourself or ground yourself in your principles of faith? And what that journey looked like?
That's a good question. I can't believe you went through that just a couple months.
I watched your monitors on the EKG and thought you were gonna die, and I'm so grateful you're here.
Oh, my Apple Watch that tells me I'm
And Patty, who's I'm watching your EKG being like, is anyone else seeing this? Talk about faith.
Gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think in any tradition, your faith is like your worldview, in essence, and it's what you embody, it's how you live in the world. And so your faith is, it can become, it's like the lens that you see through. So if you were to take apart your faith and do something else, it isn't like you're going, oh, I'm going to change this. It's like you're taking your whole lens that you see the world through, and it's very blurry, it's very blinding. And then until you figure out how to put another one in. And so there's just long liminal space of deconstructing something and creating something else. And that happens in sort of stages of consciousness throughout our lives. And so there's always moments where all these truths become new and they're outside of your box that you had. And then you go, oh my gosh, do I reject those things and defend my box? Do I include those things? Does my box get bigger? Is it just inadequate entirely? Do I need to, you know what I mean? So there's those moments where you're pulling it apart and putting it back together, or it can even feel like a free fall. Because it's like your existential reality. It's not doctrines or faiths. And so I've had lots of stages of those. I remember going to seminary, and then everything that I believed as a kid was all ripped out, and I thought, oh my gosh, and then I created something else, and then even over the last 3 years, it was a massive transition for me of faith and how I saw the world, and it felt like a free fall, honestly. It was like identity level, whoa, that's bigger. And for me, it became more of understanding it as like I call it like expansion, or like an expansive faith. And so it's just recognizing my box is just getting bigger, and I have to give it some space to shake out, and to figure out, how do I walk that out? How do I test that out? How do I live that out in the world? And what does that look like? And so I don't know, I think just learning some patience in the darkness, and then trusted friends in the darkness who would help you remember the Spirit's with you in it. So there's like a grief, there's like a death. It feels like a death in those moments, but it's like there's a grief, and then from the death, that is the Jesus story. From death comes life, and so it's just trusting that there, at some point, will be a life that comes out of it, but you don't really see it coming because I think that's like resurrection is God's business. It just comes when it comes.
Thank you.
Just random thoughts.
Repeat it one more time. I'm sorry.
Right?
It's a big question.
Yeah, so I love how you each described faith and what that means to you, and kind of really embodied it in one word or a few words. But let's kind of talk about a time when your faith was tested, and how did you ground yourself in what you know to be true of faith?
This sounds so silly. I don't think my faith has been tested because it's less about belief of what I'm gonna. I don't think I would say that, but I would like to jump off of what you said regarding if we're thinking about faith as a tradition or a framework of the way we see the world. Certainly, as a child, I grew up in a progressive tradition, Christian tradition, but I had some of those fairly, Sunday school kind of theologies. And my father died when I was 14, and I was at a point where I could have just left everything entirely and been really frustrated by a God that didn't respond to pleas. So fortunately, though, I actually was in a tradition that said God wasn't going to make any promises anyway. So sorry, that's not the way it works. And it was a relief to hear that, because otherwise God abandoned me when I needed God most. You hear people say things like, oh, God needed another angel in heaven. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that this 14-year-old and the 13-year-old, the 7-year-old, and the 40-year-old wife really needed a father and a husband. I'm pretty sure that God could make it without this one guy. I just couldn't buy that. I can't buy that now. And I get really frustrated by that when I hear other people have to experience it, because I don't think it recognizes the real grief that people are feeling. So I don't think my faith was tested per se, but my faith began to take a greater shape as I, at that point in my life, began to ask those big questions, the problem of evil, how does God work? And so for me, that's when I began to see God as, really clearly begin to take that shape of a theology of a God that is not a puppet that is picking the way the world is going to go and picking this little flower up and taking this angel up to heaven in order to chat over dinner or something. But that God would be with me through the hardest times of my life. And God would carry us, and we would somehow survive. Even if we weren't fully okay, we would survive. And that then would be the way I would live my life, would be to try to be with other people in their moments of grief and recognize that this is terrible, this sucks, there's no good reason for it. You know, in our case, it was cancer. I don't think God, the only role God plays in cancer is that connection to hold each other through it. I mean, I don't see that as anything that God ordained, any of the grief. So for me, again, it's not that my faith was tested, but my faith was, the word expanded. And I was able to really lean into the progressive tradition that my mother was already a part of. And we began to, as a community, shape what it meant to become a progressive Christian.
Thank you. I really appreciate this aspect of expansion. So I'm actually going to expand the question to, when has your faith been expanded?
Well, see, I was preparing in my mind about tested, now you expanded it. So rearrange my thoughts as I'm speaking.
I have faith that you will be okay.
So I was going to say that if you are in complete alignment with the will of God, hardly anything happens in your life that tests your faith. Okay, so, but I will talk about the time when I was first made aware of my faith and I had to re-examine my faith. And I'm going to talk about that happening after 9/11. Now, after 9/11, it wasn't that, I knew it was my so-called fellow Muslims who did that. But again, you don't really understand how it will impact you until it hits you. And I'll talk about the moment when it hit me. 3 days later, when 4 very well-dressed FBI agents showed at my door, and they wanted to talk to me. And I said, okay, well, I have nothing to hide, let's talk. And we talked. We talked about 5, 7, 10 minutes, very professional, very courteous, nothing offensive said or exchanged. And before they left, I asked them, I said, okay, what is the cause that you have graced me with your visit? And they said, well, we had some reports from people around you, our neighbors, who said you resembled one of the hijackers. And I said, officer, you realize that all the hijackers died. So not only did I reincarnate myself, but relocated from East Coast to West Coast and find a nice home in Irvine to live in with a ready-made family. But, you know, it hit me later that it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that they made me realize I'm a Muslim. And it made me question, do I really want to associate myself with a religion that these hijackers belong to? And as a young man, I'm still a young man, but a young adult. As a young man, it was a revelation. I didn't even study my own religion. I was born a Muslim. I didn't know what Muslim meant. And I started thoroughly examining my religion. And everything that I looked and tried to study, including Quran, the sayings of the Prophet and the history, did not point me in the direction that these people were guided to. And I said, oh my God. Then I also tried to study, well, maybe the other religions have things that are very different that causes them to be less violent than we do. And then I studied to the extent that I can, and I said, I don't see much of a difference. If you look at the history, there is not much of a difference there either. So instead of testing me, it made me re-examine. And so I began being a Muslim, questioned myself whether I should be a Muslim. And that journey, I'm just saying here in about 15 seconds, but that journey took me 3 years.
Wow.
Before I said, you know what? I am totally comfortable with my identity as a Muslim. Not only that, I'm going to try and do my best to go out there and present a normal face of a Muslim.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you for sharing.
So yes, I am an indigenous woman, but I was also baptized Catholic as well. So that was one of my practices. And so during the time, my dad it was an accidental death. And, I was very young and I was still trying to understand it all. And within that year, I almost lost my mom 3 times. And so I finally, in my way of being, I said, that's it. And I spoke truth in the way I know how. And I said, I'm sorry, I no longer can pray. I can no longer do this. I'm angry, I'm mad. And what I know for sure is prayer comes from the heart. So if I can't feel it, then I won't speak it. Because it's not truth. So what it taught me and how it expanded, as you said, it reminded me, as an indigenous woman, faith is not outside, it's within. It's in the smile. It's in the rising of the sun and the moon. It's in your prayer, it's in your song. But you're seeking outside of yourself, pleading, begging. Again, my mom's here. Again, we're at this crossroad. Why, God? How come? All of those, the why, all those questions. And so the gift that it brought to me is a remembrance that is within me. My faith, my spirit, my soul. It is my soul that houses this body and my spirit. And so in that way, it took me to nature, took me to the drum, took me to my voice, took me out of the begging and pleading to remember that I am connected with everything that is. And so walk in that way, trust in that. Don't for 1 minute and 1 moment think that faith is outside. It's within you. And speak truth in that way. Because if you're sending out a prayer, not in a good way, what are you sending out? Oh.
Thank you, Sua. Beautiful. this aspect of trust that you've brought up around faith, and this trust not just of what is within you, but of what is expanding outside of you. So thank you for that. I'll turn it to Marcia.
Well, I would say that my response to this would be very similar to what Reverend Sarah said, which is that, you know, if my understanding of faith writ large, anybody's faith, is that there's a recognition that the world is more about, it's not just about us, that there's something beyond our understanding that brought us here, that we're here for a reason. That's faith sort of general, and I said, you know, unity is my understanding, let's say, of what I would call, let's use the word God, just for lack of a better word. But I would, and so that's never been in question or tested, because I've always understood that there is a force out there greater. I've had so many disappointments in life, some that and great losses, and some that I've handled better than others. And I would say is that, you know, in the tradition that I was raised in, through prayer and ritual and communal engagement and activism, there's so many components to Judaism that provide tools for a meaningful, healthy, sound life that allow you to walk the walk. What's going to happen is going to happen. People you're going to love are going to die. People young are going to get disease. Car accidents are going to be there. I was never raised to think that that was a punishment or a reward in any way. And so it's interesting, because I'm sure probably many people of all faiths actually think that, but that's not the way I think. So I just want to say that the times that I have been less connected to the tools provided by Judaism to cope with life. And every faith offers you tools to cope with life. These are just the ones that I know. I have been more challenged than when I've really been able to say, I have these resources and I will get through this, and I'm not alone. So that's
Love that aspect of being Suresh, I'm going to add to your question on this aspect of the expansion of faith in your life, but I love what Siwa and Marcia brought up about prayer. So I'm going to ask you to actually also expound on what prayer means to you and how you pray. And then I'll ask each of the panelists to also weigh in on that.
Wonderful. See, prayer is a wonderful thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 or me also, 7 heads, right? So I have learned from everybody here. So she asked what is a prayer, right? Honestly, if we go and look back, what is a prayer? Prayer is, we pray to somebody, right? Somebody finite, infinite, whatever you call it, and whom we think is superior than us, right? Now, why do we think that way? We never question that, because something came up, so we just start obeying it, right? So let me honestly tell you, we have nothing like so-called prayer, so-called pay, or so-called obey. So we don't have anything now. Now, explaining this in another scenario of our Hindu Dharma is, prayer is a connection, talking like with you and me, right? Talking with your select deity or manifestation of supreme power or supreme consciousness. Power also is the wrong term, supreme consciousness. So you talk with that, you have a connection, direct connection, like a mother talking to the baby or a baby talking to the mother, right? That is the connection. So it is the expression of intense love, affection, and we get care and concern, and it's a dialogue, right? And it could be multi-log also. And as a child, what you want is learning. Thereafter you want to have wealth, so you have another aspect. Then you are fed up with everything, so you want to detach, and then you totally want to remove yourself as a egoless person or an identityless person. So these are all the stages. So our deities, and they all keep changing. You yourself change, right? I was a child, I have grown up, right? And I will also deteriorate and go away. So there is a continuous changes. Now she mentioned about the other thing is the karma. Karma, you have heard karma, right? Karma is the most misunderstood thing. Karma is something what we can do ourselves. I have heard all along from the morning everywhere here. Karma is what is going to, not something you do, action and reaction. I don't know, some Newton's law was there. So action and reaction, but karma is consequences will be there, right? If I jump the red signal, I have got to face the consequences. but I can correct myself, correct? Before you put the bell, okay? Essential prayer is, real prayer is, I am having a universal divine way of thinking, mind, wisdom, intellect, whatever you call it. And by that, drive me to my way of living. Exactly what do I live like that? Do I throw my this thing? Then, and with that comes out is my behavior or my what I would call is worshipping, service, treating each other. So we always say namaste, right? That is the best way of prayer. Namaste means I bow to the divinity or consciousness in you. Because divinity is within me. If within me, why not within you? Within everybody else. Did I try to answer?
That was good.
And I have more time, I can maybe talk 10,000 years.
I wish we had more time. I would love for you to talk to us more about what you said about prayer, which is really this aspect of two things that I think you really highlighted. This aspect of connection and this aspect of service. That's beautiful. Thank you. So same question for you, Marcia, about prayer and what does prayer mean to you and how do you pray?
Well, so in the Jewish tradition, prayer, it's an ancient tradition that goes back more than 3,000 years, and we were, like all peoples in the time, like the pagans that predated the monotheistic ideal, we were a cultic people, and the way that we felt that we would connect with God was through animal sacrifice, which not rampant or random, but specific to honor the times we wanted to give thanks or make a petition or say I'm sorry or show gratitude or whatever. There were many different specific ways that animal slaughter was used, different kinds of animals. When that ended, which happened in the first century of the Common Era, prayer became the replacement for daily, very highly ritualized animal sacrifice. And so for thousands of years, Jewish prayer has been extensive, long, grown and grown and grown with different traditions, because out of faith, I just want to say, it built not because they wanted to annoy people, but because people did have such deep faith, and it was expressed through the written word and how we expressed ourselves 3 times a day in lieu of animal sacrifice. We prayed 3 times a day, which we still do in lieu of, but I will say that in the world that we live in, let's say in the last 150 years, with assimilation, most Jewish people, not all, have become very removed from traditional Jewish prayer. It's in another language. People don't understand it. It's volumes. It feels like, who has time every day to stop? Well, it's interesting. Islam sort of modeled on that and shortened it, and it's something you can do in 5 minutes. It's a different kind of experience, but I think people felt oppressed in some ways by what Jewish prayer required of you. So I'll just say that So what I want to say is that it's interesting. I'm a cantor. I studied prayer. I love traditional Jewish prayer. I could pray all day, but I'm like the only person you'll ever hear say that. So what I want to say is that my thesis in rabbinical school was anything that you do that brings a consciousness of God as you understand it to your mind is a prayer, and it's valid, and it lifts you, and it affirms your faith, whatever that faith may be. And one of the really interesting books that moved me most is something called Praying in Burger King, about a Christian minister who was he felt like his family was moving away from prayer, and they prayed at every meal, which makes sense. And he said, and wherever we were, on the road, in a gas station, we did this, and it was really inspiring to me. So thank you.
I love that aspect of prayer being anything that brings God into your mind that really enlightens that connection with the divine. Thank you.
Prayer is a heart song, and when it's shared, it becomes sacred.
I'm sorry.
I feel like you could just leave it right there and that would be perfect. Thank you. That's beautiful.
That's your microphone.
Wow, do I get her time too?
No, but yes, but no.
No, yes. Okay. So it's how things get translated. When you say prayer in English, it pertains to two things slightly different in the Arabic. Prayer could be salah, which are the 5 daily prayers that Muslims are supposed to pray. But the other word for prayer could be dua, which is supplication. So let me talk about both of them. That's why I needed twice the time. So salah, the ritual prayer that Muslims are supposed to do, that Marsha alluded to. And by the way, I love your pronunciation of her name, Marcia. I like it. Okay, so she alluded to the Islamic prayer, and all it takes is less than 5 minutes, 5 times a day. And what you are doing by that is reminding yourself that you are more than just a physical being. Because what do we do the rest of the time? We're either working, feeding, trying to, do this, that, or the other thing for our material being. And that reminds us we are more than just the material, physical being that we are. And that is the spiritual connection we make for that 5 minutes to the Creator. And that's it. What is that prayer? We stand facing Mecca, all over the world, as you all know. Why? Because God belongs only in Mecca and He is nowhere else? No. It's uniformity. Uniformity. Because we're all worshiping the one God. So we stand there with full attention towards the God, and then we bow down to Him and we prostrate. That's the ritual prayer. Now let me speak a little bit about the supplication. And by the way, by doing that ritual prayer, we are strengthening our spiritual connection. We are nourishing or feeding the spirit. That's what that's supposed to do. The rest of the 23 hours and 25 minutes are spent in feeding our physical body, clothing, everything else. But that's the spiritual nourishment for Muslims. The supplication dua is basically just us taking our problems and our issues and our wishes to God and say, please grant it for us. And then in Islam, it's not just enough to make that plea, but your actions, which means you have to put in effort towards what you're asking, should be aligned with what your plea is. And then, after you have done that, leave the ultimate decision to the God and be at peace with whatever that decision is.
I pray, let me see. Building so much of our tradition comes out of Judaism and this idea of interaction with God. You see a lot of petitions for God, and I think that we recognize that particularly when people pray, they pray for something. A lot of praising of God. You look at the Psalms, you get it all. And I think that's why the Psalms are so powerful, and they continue to speak to us thousands of years later, because they really connect with this human desire to release, to show awe, to give gratitude, and to ask for help. In my own prayer life, I kind of wish I was more ritualized. I love what you said. I do not have such a ritual that commands that I stop what I do, but I wish I did. I think that part of that is this idea that we're free. We don't have to do something by somebody else's time clock. And yet, the reality then is that if you can pray anytime, maybe you should be praying all the time. But we get so pulled into our secular world, right, that we don't. And so I have such a great respect for Islam in particular, for the 5 times a day, because it's that jolt of there's more than me. I can connect beyond myself. So the challenge of that is this sort of like watering down of well, then when will I pray? Do I pray before bed? So many people do that. They take their prayers before bed. It's very common in Christianity. Pray before meals as well. I personally try not to pray for petition, to ask for things, because I don't think God works that way. But I know that even when my dad was dying, I was asking God, can you please save my dad? And there are times when I do that even still. God help me. And I think that's the human condition, that we're looking for something beyond ourselves, because we realize we ourselves cannot do it. We don't have control over everything. And while I don't have, that's not my theology that God can or will, I say it anyways. So I don't do it very often, but if there's that moment, God help me. Mostly I pray in order to connect. I pray when I want to feel the connection of God, to recognize that God is in me and with me and around me. And I use that as a very silent time. I'm not someone that sort of like talks out loud to God. I figure God knows what I'm thinking anyway, so I don't do it in a conversation like hi God, it's me, Sarah. But I do it in a way to connect, and I try to remind myself that in connection, I'm recognizing the power that God is in me and that I then have in order to discern how to act in the world. And I love the Serenity Prayer. It was written by a UCC Congregationalist.
And thank you for that. I love what you both kind of highlighted about this connection. Really, what all of you highlighted about this connection with God and this aspect of this heart song. And it can be in any time, whether it's 5 times a day, as that reminder for connection, or anytime you want. And I will quote, I think Reverend Janet is in the room, who says that every moment is a meditation and an opportunity for prayer. Every thought is a prayer. I misquoted you. Every moment is a meditation, and every thought is a prayer. Thank you. Hills, for you, and how do you pray?
I spent a lot of years, prayer was very frantic for me. Here's my list, and God's like Santa Claus, I'm going to ask. And sometimes he gives me what I want, and sometimes he doesn't, and I don't know why, but I'm just going to keep asking. And that worked for me for a lot of years. And I'm not doing that. I haven't done that in a long time now. It's been years, actually. I actually stepped out of the role of the church I was leading 2 years ago this weekend. So it's an interesting weekend to be here. And we handed over the church to the leaders, and we love that community so much. It's like most beloved friends. But we've expanded in so many ways that we just knew we had to keep going, and we didn't even know what that looked like. And so that was a death for us to step out and know. Now what do we do? And so some of that I haven't opened my scripture in 2 years, since the last Sunday that I spoke out of it to that community. I thought of it often. I've read those things so many times. They're very embedded in my soul. But I'm just like, how do I live out of some of those things? I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, actually, and I'm starting to view prayer through like a divine sort of feminine energy of like, it's like a receiving, and so it's a lot more silence and contemplation for me now, and there's just an awareness of spirit that's in me and in the world, and listening. A lot of listening, not a lot of talking, honestly. But then out of that, there's a recognition, and out of that awareness, and then there's like that sort of divine masculine acting out of that awareness. I'm trying to figure that out. But that's new in the last few years for me. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in process.
So prayer, in our spiritual approach, has a very specific form, because the prayer is not to beseech God to do something for us. It's to recognize that God is the creator, period. And when we unify with that creator, then we begin to feel like we're connected in a way that we can declare who we are and what it is that we want. So it's not like a Christmas list. I thought it was a great idea. But it's what kind of the qualities of life do we want to exude, to express, and to experience. So when we pray, we get to that recognition part, then we also dismiss energy from thoughts that take things away from us. So for instance, I might say there's no power any longer in me believing in hate or fear. Those kinds of things, I just remove that from, I remove power from them. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying they have no more power in my life. And then then what does have power? It's the presence of this divine expression which created all of us. So in that sense, I am then reestablishing that connection, dismissing the power, and then giving thanks, and then releasing that. So that's kind of the line that we follow. But prayer is more than that even. It's Jesus said pray unceasingly. So prayer is really just the way you think about your life. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, what you think about all day long, you become. Yeah. So if you want to become something different, think a different thought. And in thinking a different thought, it's not like it's magic. What it is, it's the same process that a seed goes through. When the seed goes in the soil, and if you were to dig it up halfway through its experience, it doesn't even look like the seed you planted, because everything expanded out and then went up. Because it's gathering everything that's necessary for its own growth. We're all gathering things that are necessary for our own growth. This experience this weekend is an opportunity to grow. And I am so excited about all of you being here, and I just bless all of you, and thank you so much for letting me. But I haven't heard the bell ring.
I have one final question for all of you, and I've saved the biggest question of all and given you the least amount of time, because as Shakespeare says, brevity is the soul of wit. So we will go with brevity. You have a minute each, but the question is, the theme of this retreat this weekend is about spiritual traditions and this aspect of this common thread that kind of permeates through all of these aspects of faith. So what does that mean to you? What is this common thread that transcends all aspects of faith, spirituality, religion? What is the common thread for you? We'll start with you, Dr. Doe.
The common thread for me is the commitment that everyone up here that you're looking at has made to be an expression of a power that's greater than ourselves. And they make it in different ways. But that's my commitment to the whole concept is to find a way where I can connect with God. And when I can connect with God, then I know that life is going to become something different for me, something in a much greater fashion. So I'm not trying to overcome a problem. Instead, I'm creating a principle that creates a consciousness, listen carefully, where the problem can't exist. So I'm just so proud of everyone on the panel here has their own way of thinking, and I honor it all. But thank you.
Every one of you for your consciousness and being. No.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, that's a really big question, and I don't know all of your traditions well enough to give a definitive sort of answer on that. I mean, I think there's an awareness that we all have of the spirit. I think there's an animating, creating, sustaining spirit of the universe that we all have connected to, and all theology is observation and human commentary on that, through our own traditions wherever we are. They've evolved greatly over time. And I think that, like, perhaps a thread is genuine encounter of a real God, and then a genuine desire to live that out and express it in the world.
I used to teach a little bit at Orange Coast College, and for some reason, I was teaching Eastern tradition, so Hinduism and Buddhism, and I remember a quote, and I don't know who it was from at this point, but it said that everyone's a Hindu because we can see everyone has a different manifestation of the one, and I kind of like that we're all Hindus, so we're all like you. But ultimately that there's this common thread, that there's something that connects us as living entities, and we then journey, whether it's our own human journey, but I really feel it in all sentient beings, including animals, and when we talk about plants, all life, we're on this journey and we're connected to this life force, and that is then our common thread. And I don't really care what name we call it, but that life force is in us, and when we recognize it in one another, that's it, we recognize it. When we see it, we recognize that there's some connection, that unity, that sameness, and it's pulsating through all of us, and we just are part of what is.
as Muslims, we are commanded to believe in all the prophets that came before, and by one estimate, there are about 124,000 prophets that came before Prophet Muhammad. So they all obviously brought the same truth, because God cannot play favorites and send one message with one prophet and a slightly different message with a different prophet and save the best message for the last prophet. We don't believe in that. God always sends the same message. And so we are supposed to believe in all true messengers that came before that. And we believe that every religion teaches us to minimize our weaknesses as human beings and maximize our strengths to the extent that we become a whole that is much more than the sum of its parts. That's what
As a young girl, not able to get right, I loved faith. I loved connecting. And so Spirit took me on a journey to learn the different ways of being. And in all that practice and within my own practice, what I come to see is we are all longing for that connection. We're all longing to join that universal pulse, that rhythm. And in all the spaces and places and everywhere that I have traveled, that's what I feel, that's what I see. That longing to connect, to be seen, to be heard, to be felt, to share in that way. So I will say it's connection, that's what I would say. Oh.
I was not, as a child, educated in other religions, not because anyone was trying to hold me back from it, but I grew up in a secular world. But the greatest privilege I've had since coming to Orange County and serving the congregations and then starting my own nonprofit and being completely immersed in the interfaith world, which is, I think, kind of how I got here today, is that when I would have the chance to experience the religious practices of my colleagues, without reservation, I'd be like, this is just like Judaism. This is just like Judaism. This is just like, I mean, it wasn't just like Judaism, I didn't mean that, but I could see that the things that we were doing as expressions of our faith were completely woven together and from the same source. So what I want to say is, the God that I believe in is manifest in every human being that I meet. I do not feel that, even though it's super old, that Judaism is the way. It's my way. But we're all going to the same place, and how we traverse this part of our journey until we transition to the next part of our journey, and there will be another part of our journey. He said, I believe that. Is just going to be, it's like, which cruise line did you take? I'm not even, did you go on? No, I'm not even trying to be funny like that. I mean, what I'm saying, they're all going, you can still get to Alaska. And so, I guess what I want to say is, so for me, what we have is that God is in every single one of us. And these opportunities bring us closer to that. And so thank you.
My salutations to all of them. Okay, now, what is common is something, very, very easy, right? We are all breathing, right? So that is the common thing. Breathing is common, right? Breathing is common in all traditions, right? So same way, in all traditions, somehow, somewhere, we are all conditioned, mind my words, conditioned to accept that something supreme is there. Okay, for a minute think that if we were not conditioned, what we would be thinking. So these all alphabets, all words are human mind's creation, all ideations are human mind's creation. They are our own endeavors, our own willpower, our own dexterity. If I know 100 words, I am very good articulator, right? If I know 7 words, I can only talk 7 words. So coming next to that is, this water bottle is there, right? I was given free, okay? We all like, at least I like free things. So somebody asked me, is it half full or half empty? All questions we face, right? So it is half full as well as half empty. It all depends on what we look at it. So this is common. Let us not reduce our life to last 4 digits, DOB, place of birth, and I don't know many more things. Let us come to ourselves that we are the super consciousness. We all are super consciousness. So that is what we call is Paramatma. So Hindu Dharma is known as Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means, English translation is ancient yet ever renewing. So in our language we can say evolutionary, right? Or let us put it this way, a drop of water cannot be separate from the waves, right? And cannot therefore be separate from the ocean, right? So this is very, very briefly I can tell before, I think she will not ring the bell. And we have some few posters and few artifacts, so they will throw some input, okay?
I love that. Thank you. And what a great note to end our panel on. And what you were saying actually reminded me of the Ruby quote that we are not a drop in the ocean, but we are the entire ocean in the drop. So thank you to each and every one of you for this aspect of unity and this aspect of this common thread that we have, this connection and living in service and living in gratitude. So I encourage each and every one of you for the rest of the time that we have today as well as tomorrow to connect with the panelists who are here, ask them any questions that you have, and please live in that connection, that love, and that joy. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your journey with us.